There are moments that split a life in two. Before and after. You don't always recognize them when they happen. Sometimes the knife is so sharp, you don't feel the cut until you're already bleeding. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Standing barefoot in my husband's home office. Holding a blue folder I was never meant to open. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello. My name is Ruth Brennan. I'm 64 years old, and I live in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, a quiet suburb just outside Philadelphia. The kind of place with old stone houses, mature oak trees, and neighbors who wave but don't pry. I want to tell you a story. My story. And I'm going to tell it the way it happened. No polish. No pretending. Just the truth, even the parts that still sting. Let me take you back to that Tuesday. October. The leaves had just started turning. Our house sat at the end of a private lane, a colonial revival that Richard and I had bought 28 years ago. Back when we were still young enough to believe in forever. Richard had left for work early that morning. He kissed my forehead in the kitchen, the way he always did. Quick. Routine. Like checking a box on a list. I'll be late tonight, he said. Client dinner. I nodded and poured his coffee into a travel mug. I didn't ask which client. I had stopped asking years ago. Around 2 o'clock, my phone rang. Richard's name on the screen. Ruth, honey, I need a favor. His voice had that edge. The one that meant he was stressed and needed something handled. What is it? I left my laptop bag at home. There's a blue folder on my desk inside the bag. I need you to scan the documents and email them to me. The meeting's in an hour. What's it about? Just partnership papers. Nothing you need to worry about. There it was. That phrase. Nothing you need to worry about. He'd been saying it for years. About finances. About the company. About everything that used to be mine to understand. I'll take care of it, I said. You're a lifesaver. Send it to my work email. He hung up before I could respond. I found the bag in his office. Leather. Expensive. A birthday gift I'd bought him 3 years ago. The blue folder was right where he said it would be. The label on the front read Partnership Realignment. I opened it without thinking. That's the truth. There was no suspicion in my mind. I was just doing what he asked. The first page was a legal document. Dated 3 weeks earlier. Not a draft. A signed original. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, because the words didn't make sense. A 40% equity stake in Brennan Manufacturing was being transferred. Not sold. Transferred. As a gift. To a woman named Danielle Porter. My hands went cold. Not shaking. Just cold. Like the blood had decided to leave them. I kept reading. Behind the contract were printed emails. Personal messages between Richard and this woman. The kind of messages you don't send to a business associate. Once this clears, we won't have to hide anymore. You promised me half. 40 isn't half. Be patient. She doesn't look at the books. She gave that up years ago. And then the line that did something permanent inside my chest. The old woman doesn't understand any of this anyway. Old woman. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood. 64 years old. 31 years married. And this is what I had become. A phrase. An obstacle. Something to work around. Behind the emails, there were photographs. Richard and a young woman. Blonde. Maybe 30. Smiling at a restaurant I recognized from his conference trip to Miami last March. Standing on a balcony I'd never seen. Holding a key like she owned something. My stomach turned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. The crying would come later. Right then, something else was happening. I was waking up. You see, I wasn't always like this. The woman who stepped back. The woman who smiled and nodded and let her husband handle things. That woman was made, slowly, over years, like a sculpture carved by small, patient hands. But the woman before her, the original, she was different. I grew up in Scranton, the daughter of a coal company accountant and a schoolteacher. Numbers made sense to me the way music makes sense to some people. Patterns, logic, truth you could verify. I went to Penn State on a scholarship. Graduated with honors in finance. Got hired at a consulting firm in Philadelphia before I turned 24. That's where I met Richard. He was handsome then, ambitious, full of ideas but short on capital. He ran a small manufacturing operation out of a rented warehouse in Chester County. Industrial components, nothing glamorous. But he believed in it. And he believed in me. "You're the smartest person I've ever met," he told me once, early in our courtship. I don't know how I got so lucky. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We got married in 1993. A small ceremony. My parents. His mother. A justice of the peace. 2 years later, my father passed away. Heart attack. Sudden and merciless. He left me an inheritance. Not a fortune, but significant. Enough to change things. Richard came to me with a proposal. "Let's build something together," he said. "Your capital. My vision. We'll be partners. 50-50. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I loved him. I trusted him. And I wanted to build something that mattered. For the first 15 years, we were equals. I handled the books, the projections, the cash flow. Richard handled clients and operations. We made decisions together. Ate dinner in the office on late nights. Built Brennan Manufacturing into something real. We didn't have children. That was a choice we made together, and I never regretted it. The company became our shared creation. Our legacy. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. It started small. Richard began attending meetings without me. "It's just operational stuff," he'd say. "You'd be bored." Then came the comments. Never cruel. Always framed as care. "You work too hard. You should relax more. This new software is complicated. Let the team handle it. You've earned a break. Let me take the wheel for a while." And I listened. Because I loved him. Because I was tired. Because maybe, I thought, he was right. I stepped back from the CFO role. Signed over operational control. Kept my ownership stake majority, on paper, but stopped attending board meetings. I took up gardening. Volunteering at the library. The things wives do when they've been gently moved aside. Richard's family helped the process along. His brother once called me a trophy wife at Thanksgiving. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. His mother suggested I find a hobby so I wouldn't be underfoot. And slowly, year by year, I became the woman in the background. The signature on documents I didn't read. The smile at company events. The wife. I stopped trusting my own judgment. I stopped asking questions. I stopped believing I was capable of understanding. That's the trick, isn't it? You can't steal from someone who's watching. So you convince them they're too old, too tired, too simple to look. But standing in that office, holding that blue folder, something cracked open inside me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would come later, hot and justified. What I felt in that moment was clarity. Cold, sharp, familiar, like meeting an old friend I'd forgotten I had. I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Richard's car, pulling into the driveway. I had maybe 30 seconds. My hands moved before my mind caught up. I pulled out my phone. Took photos of every page. The contracts. The emails. The photographs. Every piece of evidence he'd been foolish enough to keep. Then I closed the folder. placed it exactly where I'd found it, smoothed the leather of the bag. By the time Richard walked through the front door, I was standing in the hallway. Calm, composed, holding the folder out like an offering. "Did you find it?" he asked, slightly out of breath. "Right where you said." He took it from my hands. His shoulders relaxed. Relief flooded his face. "You're a saint, Ruth. I don't know what I'd do without you." He kissed my cheek. Quick, automatic. "I didn't look inside," I said softly. "You know me. All that legal stuff goes right over my head." He smiled. The kind of smile you give a child who's done something simple correctly. "That's why I love you," he said. "No stress. No drama. Just my Ruth." He grabbed his keys and headed back toward the door. "Don't wait up," he called. "This dinner might run late." The door closed behind him. The house went quiet. Just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then I walked to the window and watched his car disappear down the lane. My phone sat heavy in my pocket. The photos were there, evidence of a betrayal that went deeper than infidelity. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. Calculated, patient, designed to leave me with nothing while convincing me I deserved nothing. The old woman doesn't understand. He was wrong about that. I understood perfectly. I just hadn't been paying attention. That night, Richard came home late, smelling of whiskey and someone else's perfume. He kissed my forehead again and fell asleep within minutes. I lay beside him in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to him breathe. 31 years, half my life, built on something I thought was love but turned out to be convenience. He'd called me old like it was an ending. Like 64 meant the story was over. But lying there in the dark, I realized something. He had underestimated me. They all had. And that was going to be their mistake. I didn't know yet what I would do. The path wasn't clear. The plan hadn't formed. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not going to disappear quietly. Not this time. The woman who used to read balance sheets at midnight, who built a company from a warehouse and a dream, who trusted numbers because numbers don't lie, she was still in there. Buried, but not gone. And she was waking up. The hardest part wasn't knowing. It was pretending I didn't. For 3 days after finding that folder, I moved through our house like an actress who'd forgotten her motivation. I made breakfast. I watered the garden. I smiled when Richard walked through the door. And every night, I lay awake beside him, listening to him breathe, wondering how I'd missed so much for so long. You might ask why I didn't confront him immediately. Why I didn't throw those photographs in his face and demand answers. I've asked myself the same question. The truth is complicated. Part of me was still in shock. The mind has a way of protecting itself, of processing devastation in small doses rather than all at once. But there was something else too. Something harder to admit. I wasn't sure I had the right to be angry. That sounds absurd, I know. A woman discovers her husband is stealing her company and giving it to his mistress, and she wonders if she's allowed to be upset. But that's what years of being diminished does to you. It doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. Let me tell you about the woman I used to be. In the late 1980s, I was in my late 20s and working at Hartwell & Associates, a financial consulting firm in Center City, Philadelphia. I was the youngest analyst on the team and the only woman. The men didn't take me seriously at first. They called me sweetheart and asked me to fetch coffee. One partner suggested I'd be more comfortable in an administrative role. I responded by outperforming every single one of them. Within 3 years, I was leading client accounts worth more than their entire portfolios. I worked 16-hour days. I learned to speak in a voice that commanded attention. I walked into boardrooms and made grown men nervous. That was who I was when Richard met me. He walked into our office looking for help with his small manufacturing business. He was charming, yes. But what drew me to him was how he looked at me. Not like a woman, not like a threat, like a partner. "I don't need someone to agree with me," he said during our first meeting. "I need someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong." I fell in love with that sentence before I fell in love with him. Our early years together were everything I'd hoped for. We worked side by side. Richard handled the operations, the client relationships, the big picture vision. I handled the numbers, the budgets, the careful calculations that kept us solvent. We argued sometimes, loudly, about strategy, about risk, about whether to expand too quickly. But we always resolved it together. Two minds working toward the same goal. Those were good years. Honest years. I don't know exactly when things began to change. It started with small things. So small I didn't notice them adding up. Richard began scheduling meetings without telling me. "Just operational stuff," he'd say. "Nothing you need to worry about." He hired new executives and introduced them to everyone except me. At company events, he stopped mentioning my role. I became "my wife, Ruth," instead of "our CFO" or "co-founder." I told myself it was natural. The company was growing. Roles were evolving. Richard was the face of the business now. That was fine. That was modern. But then came the comments. "You've been working so hard for so long," Richard said one evening. "Don't you want to enjoy life a little? The new accounting software is complicated. Let the team handle it. You don't need to come to the board meeting. It's just formalities." And slowly, meeting by meeting, decision by decision, I was moved to the margins of my own company. His family accelerated the process. Richard's mother, Eleanor, never liked me. She thought her son had married beneath him. A girl from Scranton with no family connections and too many opinions. "Ruth, dear," she said once at a holiday dinner, "don't you think it's time you stepped back and let Richard shine? A woman's role is to support, not to compete." I looked at Richard, waiting for him to defend me. He said nothing, just took another bite of turkey. His brother, Thomas, was worse. He ran a real estate firm in New Jersey and considered himself an expert on everything. "You know what Richard's problem is?" he said to me at a barbecue, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He married a woman who thinks she's smarter than him. No wonder he's stressed all the time." Everyone laughed, including Richard. I laughed too, because what else could I do? Make a scene? Prove them right about me being difficult? So I swallowed my pride. Again and again, until swallowing became automatic. The turning point came 7 years ago. Richard sat me down in our living room with a glass of wine and a gentle expression. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the company's image, about how we present ourselves to investors." I waited. "Having my wife as CFO. It looks dated, like a family operation instead of a serious business." The words hit me like cold water. "We built this together," I said. "I know. And you've been amazing. But times have changed. We need fresh perspectives. New blood. You want me to step down? I want you to be happy." He reached for my hand. "You've earned a rest. Let me carry the weight for a while." I should have argued. I should have reminded him that my inheritance built the foundation he was standing on. I should have demanded to see the books, the projections, the reasoning. Instead, I asked, "Is this what you really want?" He nodded, and I signed the papers. After that, things moved quickly. I was removed from the board. My email access was streamlined. My office was converted into a conference room. Within a year, I had no formal role at Brennan Manufacturing. My name was still on documents. My ownership stake remained majority, on paper. But paper doesn't speak up in meetings. Paper doesn't ask questions. I became invisible in the company I had helped create. The worst part was how I adapted. I stopped reading financial news. I stopped asking about quarterly reports. When Richard mentioned work, I nodded and changed the subject. I took up gardening, joined a book club, volunteered at the local library. I became exactly the woman Richard wanted me to be. Quiet, content, harmless. And somewhere along the way, I started believing it was my choice. But those photographs in the blue folder changed everything. That Tuesday night, after Richard fell asleep, I crept downstairs to the kitchen. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat at the table in the dark, looking at my phone. The photos I'd taken stared back at me. Contract pages, email printouts, evidence of years of lies. And I realized something that made my chest tight with shame. I had let this happen. Not the affair, not the theft. Those were his choices, his betrayals. But I had let myself become the kind of woman who wouldn't notice. Who wouldn't ask? Who wouldn't dare? That was on me. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the Brennan Manufacturing headquarters. The building sat in an industrial park in Exton, about 20 minutes from our home. Red brick, glass entrance. The company logo I'd helped design nearly 30 years ago. I parked in the visitor lot. Not the executive spaces. Those were for people who belonged. The receptionist looked up when I walked in. A young woman I didn't recognize. "Can I help you? I'm Ruth Brennan. I'm here to see the accounting department." She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm the majority shareholder." The words felt strange in my mouth. True, but rusty. Like a language I'd stopped speaking. The receptionist made a phone call. Her voice dropped. I caught fragments. "Says she's." "No, I don't. Should I?" Finally, she looked up with a practiced smile. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. Mr. Brennan is in meetings all day. Perhaps you could schedule something for next week?" "I'm not here to see my husband. I'm here to see the financial records." Another pause. Another phone call. This time, a man appeared from the back offices. Young, confident, a face I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Brennan? I'm Derek Walsh, VP of Operations. How can I help you?" "I'd like to review the company's financial statements." His smile didn't waver. "Of course. But those requests typically go through the board. I'm sure your husband can arrange access for you." I shouldn't need my husband's permission to see my own company's books. The smile tightened. "I understand. But there are protocols. Confidentiality agreements. I'm sure you appreciate the sensitivity." I looked at this man. This stranger in a building I had helped build. Speaking to me like I was a visitor. A nuisance. And I understood. This was not an accident. This was architecture. Years of careful construction designed to keep me outside the walls of my own life. "Thank you for your time," I said. I walked out before he could see my hands shaking. That evening, Richard came home in a good mood. Whistling. Carrying flowers. "For you," he said, placing the bouquet on the kitchen counter. "Just because." I looked at the roses. Red. Perfect. The kind of gesture that used to make me feel loved. Now it felt like misdirection. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Can't a man buy his wife flowers?" He kissed my cheek. The same spot. The same pressure. The same nothing. "I stopped by the office today," I said. The whistling stopped. Oh? I wanted to look at some financial statements. Richard's expression shifted, just slightly. The smile remained, but something behind his eyes went cold. Why would you want to do that? I'm still the majority owner. I thought I should stay informed. He laughed. The kind of laugh that's meant to make you feel small. Ruth, honey, you haven't looked at a spreadsheet in years. What's gotten into you? Maybe that's the problem. The temperature in the room dropped. Richard set down his briefcase. Slowly, deliberately. Is something wrong? I could have told him then. Thrown the photos in his face. Demanded the truth. But something held me back. Instinct. Strategy. Fear. If I confronted him now, what would happen? He'd deny it. He'd gaslight me. He'd call his lawyers before I could call mine. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Nothing's wrong, I said. I just felt nostalgic. Wanted to see how things were going. Richard relaxed. His shoulders dropped. The mask returned. That's sweet. But let me handle the business stuff. It's gotten complicated. New regulations, new systems. You'd be bored out of your mind. He patted my shoulder like I was a child. How about dinner? I'm starving. I made pasta. We ate in front of the television. He watched the news. I washed dishes. And the whole time, I was thinking. Planning. Remembering who I used to be. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to my closet and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Old files. Personal records. Things I'd saved from my consulting days. Inside was a photograph from the late 1980s. Me at my desk at Hartwell and Associates. Young. Fierce. Wearing a blazer with shoulder pads and an expression that said "Try me." I barely recognized her, but she was still in there. Somewhere beneath the gardening gloves and the book club schedules and the years of learned helplessness. She was waiting. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't confront Richard, not yet. I didn't have enough information. I didn't have a plan. But I could start gathering evidence. Quietly, carefully. I needed to understand exactly what he had taken. How much, when, where the money went. I needed to become the woman I used to be. The one who trusted numbers because numbers don't lie. I opened my laptop and began searching. Forensic accountants, divorce attorneys, private investigators. The websites blurred together. Too many options. Too much legal jargon. But one name kept appearing in the reviews. Patricia Morrison, a partner at a Philadelphia firm specializing in complex divorce and corporate litigation. She's a shark, one reviewer wrote. But she's your shark. I saved the number. I didn't call. Not yet. But I would. That evening, Richard's mother called. Ruth, dear, I'm having a little gathering on Saturday. Just family. You'll come, won't you? It wasn't a question. Of course, Eleanor. Wonderful. Oh, and don't bring anything. The caterer has everything handled. You just show up and look pretty. She laughed at her own joke. I laughed too. One more time. But as I hung up the phone, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time I laughed when nothing was funny. The last time I smiled when my heart was breaking. The last time I pretended to be less than I was. Richard had spent years teaching me to disappear. But I was done being invisible. On Friday morning, I packed a small suitcase. Just a few things. Clothes for 2 days. My laptop. A folder of personal documents. The phone with all those photographs. Richard had left early for a client breakfast. I didn't ask questions. I was done asking questions that invited lies. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Visiting Susan for the weekend. Back Sunday evening. Love, Ruth. Susan was my sister in Baltimore. She wasn't expecting me. I wasn't going there. But Richard wouldn't check. He never did. I drove to a hotel near the Philadelphia airport. The kind of place business travelers use. Anonymous. Clean. Forgettable. At the front desk, a young man with tired eyes asked how he could help. 1 room. 2 nights. Quiet floor if possible. Name? I hesitated. Old habits. Ruth Brennan. He typed without looking up. Handed me a key card. Room 412. Elevator to the left. I carried my own bag. I wanted no witnesses to what I was about to do. The room was exactly what I needed. A desk by the window. A lamp with good light. An empty space where I could think clearly for the first time in weeks. I spread out the photographs I'd taken from Richard's folder. Printed copies now, laid out in order. Contract pages. Email threads. Bank references. Names and numbers and dates. Then I opened my laptop and began. You might think this was difficult for me. That after years away from financial work, I would struggle to read these documents. You would be wrong. Some skills don't disappear, they just wait. I spent 30 years reading balance sheets, tracking cash flows, spotting discrepancies that others missed. That woman was still inside me. Buried under self-doubt, yes. But alive. And now she was angry. The first thing I confirmed was Danielle Porter's compensation. I didn't have access to company systems. Not anymore. But I had something almost as good. Before I left the house, I'd found Richard's backup drive in his desk drawer. Password protected, but the password was our anniversary. He'd used it for 20 years. Some men are arrogant enough to believe they'll never be caught. The drive contained years of records. Personal copies of company documents. The kind of files you keep when you're planning something you don't want others to see. Danielle Porter was listed as a strategic development consultant. Monthly compensation $28,000. Plus a company car. Plus an expense account. Plus quarterly performance bonuses that totaled more than my original investment in the company. I did the math. In 3 years, Richard had paid this woman nearly $1.4 million. For what? There were no project reports. No deliverables. No evidence she'd ever done actual work. She wasn't a consultant. She was a beneficiary. But the salary was just the surface. I kept digging. There was an LLC I'd never heard of. Keystone Holdings, LLC. Registered in Delaware. Richard was listed as the sole member. Through this shell company, he'd purchased a condominium in Miami. $1.2 million. Cash. He'd bought a luxury car. Leased office space in Florida. Made investments in companies that existed only on paper. All funded by transfers from Brennan Manufacturing. Labeled as vendor payments or consulting fees. Money that should have stayed in our company was flowing into his private pocket. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. Richard had been doing this for years. Not months. Years. Small transfers at first. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. But they grew larger over time. Bolder. He'd gotten comfortable. Confident that no one was watching. And why wouldn't he be? He'd spent a decade convincing everyone, including me, that I was too old, too tired, too simple to understand. The perfect crime. Steal from someone you've already made invisible. By midnight, my eyes burned. My back ached from hunching over the laptop. But I couldn't stop. Because buried in a subfolder labeled Personal Tax Planning, I found something that made my blood run cold. Draft divorce papers. Not filed. Just prepared. Waiting. The terms were insulting. I would receive the house. A modest monthly allowance. A token percentage of liquid assets. Nothing from the company. Nothing from the real wealth. The document described me as a homemaker with no significant income or professional skills. Homemaker. After building the financial foundation of a company now worth over $40 million. After 31 years of marriage. This was his plan. Transfer the equity, hide the assets, then file for divorce and offer me pennies. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark, let the silence fill the room. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. What I felt was something colder. Something steadier. Resolve. The next morning, I made a phone call. Morrison and Associates. How may I direct your call? I'd like to speak with Patricia Morrison. May I ask what this is regarding? I took a breath. Divorce. And corporate fraud. A pause. One moment, please. Patricia Morrison's voice was calm and direct. No warmth. No coldness. Just precision. Mrs. Brennan, tell me what's happening. I talked for 20 minutes. Explained everything. The folder. The photographs. The shell company. The draft divorce papers. She didn't interrupt. Didn't gasp. Didn't offer sympathy. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you have documentation? Yes. All of it. Good. Can you come to my office Monday morning? 9 o'clock. I'll be there. Bring everything. And Mrs. Brennan? Yes? Don't confront your husband. Don't change your behavior. Let him believe everything is normal. I understand. You've already done the hardest part. Now let me do mine. She hung up. Efficient. Professional. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. But hope is a fragile thing. And the universe has a way of testing it. That afternoon, my phone rang. Richard's number. Hey, honey. How's Susan? Fine. We're having a nice time. Good, good. Listen, I need to ask you something. My heart rate spiked. Did he know? What is it? Have you seen my backup drive? The little silver one I keep in my desk? The blood drained from my face. Your backup drive? Yeah, I can't find it anywhere. I thought maybe you moved it while cleaning or something. I forced my voice to stay calm. I haven't touched your desk in weeks. You know I don't go in there. A pause. Was he suspicious? Must have misplaced it. No big deal. Just some old files. I'm sure it'll turn up. Yeah. Anyway, enjoy your sister. See you Sunday. He hung up. I sat very still, breathing slowly, thinking fast. He was looking for the drive. He wasn't panicking yet, but he was aware something was missing. I had to move quickly. That evening, I made another call. This one to a number I hadn't dialed in 15 years. Daniel Kim answered on the third ring. Hello? Daniel. It's Ruth Brennan. Silence. Then, carefully, Mrs. Brennan. It's been a long time. Daniel had worked at Brennan Manufacturing since the early days. He was there when we operated out of that small warehouse in Chester County. When Richard and I shared one office and made every decision together. He was one of the few people left who remembered who I used to be. I need your help, Daniel. Another pause. What kind of help? I need to understand what's been happening at my company. The real numbers, not what Richard shows the board. I heard him exhale, long and slow. Mrs. Brennan, I know I'm asking a lot. I know the position this puts you in. It's not that. It's just. He trailed off. Just what? I've been worried about the same things. For a while now. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Transfers that don't make sense. Payments to vendors I can't verify. Consultants with no contracts. Why didn't you say something? To whom? Richard controls everything. The board doesn't question him. And you. He stopped. And I wasn't around to ask. I didn't mean it like that. No, you're right. I wasn't. Daniel agreed to meet me. Sunday morning. A coffee shop in Conshohocken, far enough from Bryn Mawr that no one would recognize us. He arrived carrying a leather messenger bag. Same one he'd had 20 years ago. Some things don't change. We took a table in the back corner, away from windows. I brought what I could, he said quietly. Copies. Nothing that will be missed. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were spreadsheets, bank statements, transaction logs. This goes back 3 years, he said. Before that, the records are archived. I'd need more time. I scanned the pages. The same patterns I'd found on Richard's backup drive. Shell payments, phantom vendors, money disappearing into entities that existed only on paper. How much? I asked. Daniel looked at me with tired eyes. Conservatively, 4 to 5 million, maybe more. I set down the papers. He's been stealing from his own company. From your company, Daniel corrected gently. We talked for an hour. Daniel explained how Richard had restructured the accounting department over the years. Loyal employees moved to key positions. Anyone who asked too many questions was promoted to irrelevant roles. He built a system, Daniel said. A machine designed to hide what he was doing. And no one noticed? People noticed. But people need jobs. They have mortgages. Kids in college. He looked down at his coffee. I'm not proud of my silence, Mrs. Brennan. But I didn't know how to fight it alone. You're not alone anymore. That night, I drove home. Richard was waiting in the living room, watching golf on television, a glass of bourbon in his hand. There she is, he said cheerfully. How was Baltimore? Good. Relaxing. You look tired. Long drive. I set down my bag. Kissed his cheek. The performance came easier now. Practice. Any news while I was gone? I asked. Nothing exciting. Board meeting next week. The usual. He smiled at me. The same smile I'd trusted for 30 years. And I smiled back. Because the woman standing in that living room wasn't the same one who'd left on Friday. She had evidence. She had allies. She had a plan. Richard didn't know it yet, but his world was about to change. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Monday morning, I would meet with Patricia Morrison. I would hand her everything. The photographs, the bank records, the draft divorce papers, and then the real work would begin. I wasn't just fighting for money. I wasn't even fighting for revenge. I was fighting for something I'd lost so gradually I didn't notice it was gone. My name, my voice, my right to exist as more than someone's silent wife. Richard had called me an old woman like it was an ending. He was about to learn it was just the beginning. The doorbell rang at 7:42 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock. Waiting. Richard was upstairs, showering, singing something off-key. A man without worries. I opened the door. A woman in a gray blazer stood on our porch. Professional, unsmiling. Behind her, a man with a clipboard. Mrs. Ruth Brennan? Yes. My name is Karen Wells. I'm a process server for the Montgomery County Court. She held out an envelope. These are for your husband. I took the papers. Thick, heavy. Thank you. She nodded and walked back to her car. I closed the door, stood in the hallway, listened to the water running upstairs. It was happening. Patricia Morrison had moved fast. Monday morning, I'd sat in her office for 3 hours. Showed her everything. The photographs, the shell company records, the draft divorce papers, Daniel's documentation. She'd reviewed each page with the focus of a surgeon studying scans. When she finished, she looked at me and said 5 words. He documented his own destruction. By Wednesday, she'd filed emergency motions. Asset freeze on all joint accounts. Temporary restraining order on company funds. Civil complaint for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and misappropriation. Once he's served, Patricia warned me, everything changes. He'll know. And he'll react. I'm ready. Are you sure? Men like your husband don't surrender quietly. I thought about 31 years. The slow erasure. The careful diminishment. The way he'd trained me to doubt my own mind. I'm sure. The water stopped upstairs. I heard Richard's footsteps. The bedroom door opening. His voice calling down. Ruth? Was someone at the door? I didn't answer. He came down the stairs in his bathrobe. Hair still wet. Face relaxed. Then he saw what I was holding. What's that? I handed him the envelope. You've been served. Richard stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. I watched his face change. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then something darker. What the hell is this? Read it. His eyes moved across the pages. I saw the moment he understood. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands began to tremble. This is insane. Asset freeze? Fraud charges? He looked up at me. Ruth, what did you do? What I should have done years ago. This is a mistake. There's been some kind of. There's no mistake. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this moment in my head 100 times. The words came out exactly as I'd planned. I found the folder, Richard. The partnership transfer. The emails to Danielle. The photographs from Miami. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You went through my things? You asked me to scan documents. Remember? The blue folder. Your meeting. I watched the memory hit him. The realization of his own carelessness. That was private. You had no right. I had every right. I'm still the majority owner of that company. Or did you forget that while you were giving away my shares? Richard's face hardened. This was the version of him I'd rarely seen. The one behind the charm. The one that appeared when things didn't go his way. You don't understand what you're looking at, he said. Those documents are complicated. Business arrangements you wouldn't understand? Because I'm old? Because I don't read the fine print? He flinched. I saw that email, Richard. The old woman doesn't understand any of this. Your words. That was taken out of context. Was it? What context makes that acceptable? He set the papers down on the hall table. Ran his hands through his wet hair. Tried a different approach. Ruth, honey, let's sit down and talk about this. There's an explanation for everything. I don't want explanations. I want the truth. The truth is complicated. No, the truth is simple. You've been stealing from our company. Hiding assets. Planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. That's not. I saw the draft papers, Richard. The ones describing me as a homemaker with no significant professional skills. After everything I built. His jaw tightened. You haven't built anything in 10 years. The words hung in the air. Sharp. Honest. Finally. There it is, I said quietly. That's what you really think. Richard's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously. He glanced at the screen. His face went white. What did you do to the accounts? Frozen. All of them. The company accounts too? Especially those. He grabbed my arm. Tight. Too tight. Ruth, listen to me. You have to undo this. Right now. There are payroll obligations. Vendor payments. You'll destroy everything. I pulled my arm free. The company will continue operating. Essential functions are protected, but your access is suspended pending investigation. Investigation? What investigation? The forensic accountants Patricia hired have already found enough to involve authorities. Authorities? Tax fraud, Richard. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. These aren't civil matters anymore. His phone kept buzzing. He ignored it now, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Who are you? I'm the woman you married. The one you've been trying to erase for the past decade. He sat down on the stairs. Heavily, like his legs had given out. For a moment, he looked old. Older than I'd ever seen him. I never meant for it to go this far, he said. For what to go this far? The affair? The theft? The lies? All of it. He put his head in his hands. Danielle was supposed to be. I don't know. An escape. Something exciting. But it got complicated. Complicated? You gave her 40% of my company. Our company. No, Richard. My inheritance. My capital. My spreadsheets that kept us solvent in the early years. You built on my foundation and then convinced me I was worthless. He looked up. There were tears in his eyes. I couldn't tell if they were real. I didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, you did. You just didn't mean to get caught. The doorbell rang again. Richard's face twisted with confusion. I walked past him and opened the door. Two men in suits. Calm. Official. Mrs. Brennan? We're investigators from the state attorney's office. We have a warrant to speak with Richard Brennan. I stepped aside. He's right inside. What happened next felt like watching a movie. Everything slow and clear. Richard standing up. His bathrobe suddenly pathetic. The investigators explaining his rights. You're not under arrest. But we have questions about financial irregularities at Brennan Manufacturing. You can have an attorney present. I want my lawyer. That's your right. They escorted him upstairs to dress. I heard drawers opening. The sound of his footsteps, heavier now. When he came back down, he was in a suit. Trying to look composed. But his eyes were wild. He stopped in front of me. This isn't over, Ruth. No, it's just beginning. He walked out with the investigators. Got into their car. And just like that, the house went quiet. I stood in the doorway for a long time. The October air was cold. The leaves had turned golden and red. Patricia had warned me about this moment. The emptiness that comes after action. You'll feel strange, she'd said. Like you've stepped off a cliff and discovered you can fly. She was right. I felt weightless, unmoored, free in a way that was almost terrifying. That afternoon, Richard's family started calling. His mother first. Eleanor's voice was ice. Ruth, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but this ends now. It's not a stunt, Eleanor. Richard said you've gone crazy. That you're making wild accusations. Did he tell you about the forensic audit? The shell companies? The millions he's been hiding? Silence. Those are business matters. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I've always understood. I just stopped trusting myself. You're destroying this family. No, your son did that. I'm just refusing to be buried with the evidence. I hung up. His brother Thomas called next. Louder. Angrier. You've really done it now, Ruth. Happy? Not particularly. You know Richard will fight this. He has resources. Connections. Had resources. Most of them are frozen. You think you can win against him? He's been running circles around people his whole life. That's the thing, Thomas. He wasn't running circles around me. He was just convincing me to stand still. He sputtered something about loyalty. About family. I hung up on him too. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. No television. No music. Just the ticking of the grandfather clock and the settling of an old house. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Danielle Porter. I stared at the screen. The other woman. The one who'd been receiving my money, my shares, my husband's promises. I should have ignored it. Let my lawyers handle it. But I was tired of letting other people handle my life. I typed back, tomorrow. 2 p.m. The coffee shop on Lancaster Avenue. Her reply came immediately, I'll be there. That night, I dreamed about the woman I used to be. The young analyst with the calculator in her purse. The one who trusted numbers because numbers don't lie. In the dream, she looked at me and smiled. Took you long enough, she said. I woke up at dawn. Clear-headed. Ready. Richard had spent years training me to be invisible. But invisible women are dangerous. We see everything. And eventually, we speak. Spring arrived quietly that year. The dogwoods bloomed along our street. The forsythia turned gold. The world kept moving forward, indifferent to the wreckage of one marriage and the resurrection of one woman. I stood at my office window, my office now, watching the morning light spread across the parking lot of Brennan Manufacturing. No, not Brennan anymore. The new sign had been installed the week before. Simple. Clean. Carter and Associates Industrial Group. Carter was my maiden name. The name I was born with. The name I'd set aside 31 years ago when I believed love meant becoming someone else. I had taken it back. The legal proceedings lasted 8 months. 8 months of depositions, document reviews, court appearances, and negotiations conducted through attorneys who billed by the quarter hour. Richard fought at first. He hired expensive lawyers, made accusations, claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd been manipulated by outside influences. But evidence is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about charm or connections. The forensic audit revealed what I already knew. Over 7 years, Richard had diverted nearly $6.2 million from company accounts into shell entities, private investments, and gifts to Danielle Porter. The tax authorities got involved. Then federal investigators. By January, Richard's lawyers were advising him to settle. The divorce was finalized in March. I kept the house, my full ownership stake, and a judgment for financial damages that Richard would be paying for years to come. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of tax fraud. The sentence was lenient probation, fines, community service. White-collar crime rarely sees the inside of a cell. But his reputation was finished. His name was mud in every boardroom from Philadelphia to New York. The man who once called me old woman was now introduced at parties as the one who got caught. I took no pleasure in his fall. Not really. Revenge is a dish that fills you up but leaves you hungry an hour later. What satisfied me was something simpler. Something quieter. I had survived. I met Danielle Porter the day after Richard was taken for questioning. She came to the coffee shop looking smaller than I'd expected. Younger, somehow. The confidence I'd imagined was nowhere to be found. She sat across from me with red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands. I didn't come to apologize, she said. I know that doesn't mean anything. Then why did you come? Because I have information. Documents. Things Richard gave me that I didn't understand at the time. She slid a folder across the table. I was stupid, she said. He told me you were separated. That the divorce was just paperwork. That everything he was doing was legal. I looked at her. 30 years old. Pretty in that polished way that takes effort. A woman who'd made bad choices for understandable reasons. Did you love him? She laughed bitterly. I loved what he promised. The life. The security. The feeling of being chosen. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. I just wanted you to know that I'll cooperate fully. With investigators, with your lawyers. Whatever you need. She stood up to leave. Mrs. Brennan? For what it's worth. He talked about you sometimes. When he thought I wasn't paying attention. What did he say? That you were the smartest person he'd ever met. That he never deserved you. She left before I could respond. I sat alone with my coffee, thinking about the strange architecture of betrayal. How people can admire and destroy in the same breath. How the truth sometimes comes from the last person you'd expect. I never saw Danielle again. But her testimony helped seal Richard's fate. I hope she found her way to something better. We all deserve second chances. Even the ones who hurt us. Taking over the company was harder than I expected. Not the business part. That came back to me like riding a bicycle. The numbers made sense. The strategies aligned. What was difficult was facing the people who had watched my erasure and said nothing. The board members who'd laughed at Richard's jokes about his retired wife. The executives who'd attended meetings I was never invited to. The employees who'd seen me disappear and assumed I'd chosen to go. Some resigned before I could fire them. Others stayed and tried to pretend nothing had happened. I called a company-wide meeting on my third day as interim CEO. Standing at the podium in the main conference room, I looked out at 100 faces. Some curious, some afraid, some skeptical. I didn't give a speech about vision or growth or quarterly targets. Instead, I told them the truth. Most of you don't know me, I said. Or you think you know me as Richard's wife. The woman who used to sign checks and then disappeared. The room was silent. I'm here to tell you who I actually am. I'm Ruth Carter. I built the financial foundation of this company over 30 years ago. I was pushed aside slowly, carefully, until I believed I had nothing left to offer. I paused. That ends today. This company will be run with transparency, integrity, and respect. Anyone who can't work that way is free to leave. Anyone who stays will be treated as a partner in what we're building. I stepped away from the podium. That's all. Back to work. The months that followed were exhausting. And exhilarating. I worked 16-hour days. Rebuilt relationships with clients who'd drifted away. Hired new executives who valued competence over politics. Daniel Kim became my CFO. The man who'd quietly gathered evidence when no one else would. The man who'd remembered who I used to be. I always knew you'd come back, he told me once. I didn't, I admitted. That's why it matters. You came back anyway. By summer, the company had stabilized. Revenue was up. Morale was improving. The stock price had recovered. But the real change was inside me. I woke up differently now. Without the low hum of anxiety that had been my companion for years. Without the constant question of whether I was enough. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed someone to steal everything from me before I could see it. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry. At Richard. At his family. At the years I lost believing their lies about me. The honest answer is sometimes. Anger visits like weather. It comes, it passes. I don't fight it anymore. But I don't live there either. What I feel most often now is something closer to gratitude. Not for the betrayal, never for that, but for the awakening it forced. For the woman I rediscovered in the wreckage. For the life I'm building now, at 64, that belongs entirely to me. I sold the house in Bryn Mawr last month. Too many memories. Too many rooms that echoed with a marriage that was never what I thought. I bought a smaller place. A townhouse in Chestnut Hill with a garden and a view of the Wissahickon Valley. Enough space for me and my books and the life I'm learning to enjoy. I travel now, something I never did when I was too busy being invisible. Last month I went to Portugal. Walked along the coast. Ate fish I couldn't pronounce. Let the Atlantic wind remind me that the world is bigger than one man's betrayal. Next year, I'm planning Italy. Maybe Greece after that. I have time. I have resources. I have myself. That's more than enough. If you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life, I want to tell you something. It's not too late. Whatever they told you about yourself that you're too old, too simple, too much trouble, it's not true. It was never true. The people who diminish you do it because your full power frightens them. They build cages out of small comments and gentle condescension, and they hope you'll learn to love the bars. But the door was never locked. You just forgot you could open it. I think about Richard sometimes. Not with longing, not with hatred, with something closer to pity. He had a partner who would have stood beside him through anything. A woman who loved him with her whole heart. And he chose to make her small instead of letting her stand tall. That's his loss. His burden. Mine is lighter now. Last week, I sat in my new office and signed a contract that will take the company into its next chapter. A partnership with a manufacturing consortium. New markets. New possibilities. The pen felt familiar in my hand. The numbers made sense. The future looked bright. A young woman from the legal team brought me coffee afterward. She couldn't have been older than 25. Mrs. Carter, she said, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you do it? Start over at my age? She blushed. I didn't mean, it's fine. I smiled. The answer is I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped believing the stories other people told about me. I started writing my own. She nodded slowly, taking it in. Thank you, she said. That helps. Good. Now go be brilliant. The world needs more women who trust themselves. She left with a small smile. And I turned back to the window, watching the afternoon light paint gold across a company I had built, lost, and reclaimed. My name is Ruth Carter. I am 64 years old. I was betrayed by the man I loved, dismissed by the family I married into, and robbed of the company I helped build with my own hands. But I am still here. Standing, working, living, writing the next chapter of a story that isn't over yet. Richard called me an old woman like it was the end. He was wrong. It was just the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own strength, if it gave you hope that it's never too late to reclaim your life, then sharing it was worth every word. I'm truly grateful you stayed with me until the end. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please subscribe to Grandmama Radio. Hit the like button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Your support means everything to this community of listeners who believe that every voice matters, especially the ones the world tried to silence. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, your story isn't over yet.